Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Get Printing. I'm your host, Zach Dewhurst, the Business Development Manager at DecoNetwork. Are you looking to start your custom t-shirt printing business, but don't know what equipment to buy? Today, we're thrilled to have Zach Bieberstein of M&R, a leading manufacturer of screen, digital squeegee, DTG, and DTF printing equipment. Fun fact about Zach is, just like me, he went to Ohio State, so we're both fellow Buckeyes. Zach is here to share his valuable insight when it comes to understanding the differences between each decoration method and which one to purchase based on your customer's demand, the products you're going to be decorating, and all the other variables to consider when choosing between screen, digital squeegee, DTG, and DTF printing equipment. But before we get started, we need to talk about our awesome sponsor, DecoNetwork. DecoNetwork allows you to effortlessly organize production, integrate with suppliers, manage your orders, and sell online all on one platform. No more headaches or wasted time using multiple software tools. DecoNetwork streamlines your workflow from order management to artwork approval, production workflows, and shipping. Plus, with its powerful e-commerce capabilities, you can create a beautiful online store that attracts customers and boosts sales. It's time to take your business to the next level. Visit DecoNetwork.com and request your free demo today. DecoNetwork, print shop automation software to organize production and sell online. With that said, let's get back to the show. How's it going, Zach?
Hey, good, thanks.
This is Zach Squared today.
It is.
Zach, I'm real excited to talk with you about all these different printing methods and really that often misconception that one is better than another. I mean, that's like saying a hammer is better than a drill. They are used for different things. So let's just dive into it. Can you give us a rundown of the different printing processes that are typically used to decorate apparel and what M&R offers as far as each process?
Yeah, thanks for that. And it is exciting to talk about this because I've kind of seen everything develop and grow and kind of find its place in the industry. So it's fun to talk about how they work together. And I think your analogy is perfect, right? If the Peter Walsh said to me once, if all you have is a hammer, you only see nails, right? That old analogy. And I think it's spot on because you see a business grow from the ground up and you say, okay, they've invested in screen print. Well, everything to them is screen print. But as they start to add these different technologies and these different decoration methods, you start to see their business evolve. Either it takes what they do and shifts how they do it. Maybe it adds efficiency, maybe it adds speed, maybe it adds quality, or you see them open new doors and be able to do new things. And so the four methods we're talking about, of course, are screen, hybrid, DTG, and DTF. Traditionally, screen is really talked about as one thing. I kind of like to talk about it sometimes as hand print and screen print, both automatics and manuals, because they do have their own space. But if we talk about the comparison of screen print to hybrid to DTG to DTF, which is kind of the order they came into the market, or for most people the way they came, it really is interesting to watch those businesses change as they adapt them, and I saw it from the inside out. Screen first, right? So screen really is the foundation of a lot of shops. It's built for efficiency. It's built for versatility. It's built for being able to put a graphic on a shirt and have it be there forever. And so it was economy of scale for a long time. You see these screen print shops historically running 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 units of a graphic. And that's where these shops started. And so screen print was really the foundation there. I think, large runs, simple designs, that's still where it exists. Different fabrics, different compositions, being able to print on polyester, being able to print on cotton, being able to print on nylon, being able to print on rayon, all of those sort of things. I think screen print's, pretty straightforward. Are you still seeing it fit in that sector today?
I mean, yes, but based on my feedback and being a part of groups like Shirt Lab Tribe, which I know M&R is a sponsor of, you just hear more and more about shops going digital. I mean, it'd be like still using a typewriter and convincing someone that a computer is just not necessary. It's not that true of a comparison, but the minimums for screen printing I've seen go up because we're going to digitally print it at a certain point. And it's again, like sleeve prints, they're a hassle on a screen press. You got to change the patterns, do all that. I know a lot of the shops, you know what? No, we'll screen print the front or back, but we're heat pressing the sleeves. It's a lot easier. The customer does not care. We can make the colors work. So there's always a time, but you would know better than me. But if I was a betting person, I would not invest in screen print equipment stock. I would be investing in digital printing stock because, that's just where it's going.
Well, it's an interesting notion and concept. This is talked about a lot. And I think it's funny because the same conversation happened when digital came out. And everybody said, well, it's going to kill screen print. And then we watched it eat into a little bit. But really what happened was digital created this platform to be able to do direct-to-consumer goods. Yep. It didn't really erode away all of screen print. It took away the screen print jobs that people didn't want to screen print anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
The one-piece 10-color job that somebody had to do because they had a really good customer and they just needed that, or the fill-in order of 24 pieces for a bookstore, those sort of things. So in reality, digital has opened more doors than it has stolen, work from screen print. You're always, I'm a firm believer, you're always going to have a place for screen print. Your center chest, one color, two color, logo design, athletic, it's always going to be there. Now, is it growing? Not necessarily. But is it eroding the way that people projected when digital came on the market? No. And will it plateau and kind of have its place in the market? I think it's finding those legs. And honestly, what's interesting is we're seeing that some screen print is starting to come back a little bit too. You're seeing some of the things you can't do in digital, the special effects and the raised graphics and the metallics. People are starting to get a hunger for the things that they can't get quickly. They're going back to that.
What I've kind of seen, Zach, and again, I could be off, but when we're talking digital, like DTG first, and then essentially your hybrid digital squeegee, and now again in the last 4 or 5 years, DTF has just changed the way shirts are decorated. But the other thing that happened when DTF was first hitting the market was the pandemic, and that has changed everyone's perception, even outside of our industry. Labor is extremely hard to get, keep, and so forth. Screen printing labor is a lot more difficult. I mean, it's a lot more of a skill than most of these digital processes. So that's another reason I think I've seen a lot of shops where, to me, it's become, now I know how to outsource. That's something that took me a long time as a business owner to learn. When I first was hitting the market, I was told by an advisor, you don't need to buy equipment. You can outsource all of this. I would not, and just focus on selling. And I completely, ignored that advice. But when it comes to outsourcing screen printing to contract decorators, it's never been easier. And what I've seen is there's just so many shops that are willing to print at such a cheap price that it just funnel out to them. They're good at it. They have the staff. I just don't want the headache of, again, I think it's more labor than anything else. It's not the fact that, hey, I prefer this. It's that it's easier to put a body here than it is here.
Yeah, I think you're right in that certain sectors have more skilled labor and certain sectors have less skilled labor and certain sectors have less labor in total. I don't think that DTF necessarily has a ton less labor, but it is less skilled than some of these others, right? I think you're right there. And so your efficiency can change depending on your market and your labor market and your labor cost. And I think that's a good segue into hybrid, because hybrid really came on the scene to do a couple things. One is that it brought the cost down for really complicated jobs. You don't have to set up 10 screens anymore. You can set up just a few screens, do all your color digitally, have the best of both worlds, still be able to print on polyesters, cottons, everything else with dye blockers if you need, and then put all the color on top without setting up the screen, setting up your 10 screens every single time you want to print 48 pieces, 100 pieces. I think, the variety that you can do with it and the flexibility it has is really interesting. Some of the things you can do with adding specialties with digital and high colors, or doing templating designs where I've got one background and I can do a whole bunch of different fills or a whole bunch of different patterns on it. And I'm, I'm only setting up the press once. So what Hybrid did was give you all of those other options without adding labor. It took away the setup time and the setup cost that you had in order to do those variations or to do an extreme number of colors. Through the years, I saw a lot of the process and simulated process jobs move to hybrid jobs. You didn't have to have that skilled person in your screen room anymore or in your pre-press anymore to be able to do those separations for spot process and simulated process. You could do it through the digital version and the hybrid version. So I think just like you're talking in DTF, hybrid sort of took some of that pressure off people who were trying to screen print everything. And then after that, you graduate into regular DTG. And you've got shops that start from the ground up and have got one little machine, and you've got shops that did everything and they want to bring digital in order to be a little faster or to have a little higher detail and higher quality. I could do my spot process job on a 14 color setup, or I can do it on DTG and get even sharper detail. There are those sort of qualitative benefits as well as quantitative. So as you're starting to set up your shop, and you understand your screen cost, you understand your labor cost, you understand your overhead cost, your setup times, you plug all of this in and you create a matrix. And now you say, okay, when I tip over from 72 pieces, between 72 and 144, well, my handprint's no longer efficient. I need to move to screen print. But if my number of colors goes above 3, well, then I push it to hybrid, because then I don't have to set up so many screens, and I make more money that way, and I get the jobs out quicker that way. So every single tool, back to the analogy at the beginning, every single tool that you have in your toolbox is sort of expanding your horizons to be able to take one job and do it differently. Could you take a one color white and print it one piece in screen, handprint, DTG, DTF, hybrid? Yes. You could do it in all of those technologies, but now you have the ability to choose. Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it cost? Is it efficiency? Now you can pick instead of having to shoehorn it into whatever you have.
Yeah, one of my favorite shops I've ever toured is right in M&R's backyard, Same Day Teagues. Owner Pete Bolsoni, great guy.
Great guy.
Pete has a fun shop. He has several autos, but he has a digital squeegee. He has an M&R Polaris DTG, and he also has Quattro DTF. Right. And something I think is really interesting is when he offers a printing service to his customers, he calls it screen printing and digital printing. And then he will decide what process makes the most sense. Most of your customers do not care how it's actually done. They just want it to look good. I met you a couple weeks ago at the Printing United event, and last year they had the Printing United Summit that I went to. And one thing that we were all just kind of talking about is how much we thought the customers would complain about the hand of DTF. Now, to some customers, it is a big deal, but every shop owner and printer, we're going to beat ourselves up over the little things more than what the customer cares about a perfect print. They don't really care about the hand as much as we do. Yeah, not everybody's that way. That's why you need to know who your market is when you select a process. You know, I was at the expo a couple of weeks ago. I was walking around the room. Pretty big retail brand is bringing their production in-house. They would just outsource it, and they want more control. So they're bringing it in-house, and they're adamant they're going screen print because that's what their customers are used to, and they're just not going to accept that digital, print. One other thing, Zach, that I often would forget about the digital squeegee is that it's still an automatic press. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to run it as a 6-color auto, you absolutely can. And I've been in shops, Miami, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Each one of them had a digital squeegee M&R setup, and they used it as a big selling tool to contract clients. Because hey, we can do your regular screen printing, but we also have this capability in our back pocket, and that seems like a big differentiator. So if I was getting into contract screen printing, I would be going digital squeegee, because every one of them are like, this is what sets us apart.
Yeah, hybrid really gives you the ability to have traditional digital specialty printing all in one place, and you don't have to utilize all of it at the same time. So, I can just screen print on it for, burst capacity when I need fill-in jobs. I need some, an extra press on my floor. I can use it for that. If I need to make sure that I've got a 10-color job that, maybe I've got a 10-color press and I can set it up and print it, but I might get a reorder. And, when I set it up the second time, my artist of a screen printer is going to set it up just a little bit different than the last guy did, and the color's going to come out a little bit different. But if I set it up on the hybrid and I use the digital file, it's going to be the same every time. So there are all kinds of advantages to each of these technologies that allow you to say, okay, I've created this matrix that says this is when I use what, but I have the ability to look at something and say, you know what, I'll have a qualitative advantage if I put it here, or I'll have an efficiency advantage in my shop because I've got all my presses full if I put it here, And you're right, DS is, and hybrid is a technology that really allows you to do that and have more variety and flexibility in your decision making.
To just back up a little bit, Zach, so digital squeegee is like the third type of screen printing in a way. But I really like how you looked at manual and automatic screen printing as really two different processes. And obviously there would be times, typically manual is going to be fewer colors, fewer amount of impressions.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I keep hearing all the time is if screen printing, it's really dying the most out of screen, again, it's not dying, it's just pivoting, or it's finding its place still, but manual screen printing. Mm-hmm. Do you think that is just tanking way more than, automatic screen printing is on the rise?
Yeah, I wouldn't use those words, but I would say that manual screen printing, it is an investment, right? If you're starting out, it's an investment. And I think that there are a lot of shortcuts on the market now. I can buy a little DTG printer, I can buy a little DTF printer, I can get into it. But if you start that way, what happens is you hit a wall, right? If you have a small DTG machine, how are you going to run the 1,000-piece job that came in that you're really happy about because you finally got a 1,000-piece job, and it's going to take you days of just sitting there waiting for this one machine to go? And so I think it's limiting. It is something that people are saying, hey, I can dive into DTF and start here and I can build a business off this, but it does close some doors. And so I think that the one thing, and I'm not sure if this answers your question exactly, but the one thing that manual printing, the advantage that it has, is it allows you to continue to scale to build that business where you're not cut off from being able to do some of those other things. Is it the sector that is probably getting hit the hardest? Yes, as technologies become easier to use and easier to understand, then things that are more of an art form, more of a process based, when you have to build screens and understand separations, that stuff is going to be less accessible to certain people. But I think the optimist in me says, okay, all these people buying DTF machines means that these people who are really good at screen printing and really good at separations and really good at what they do, this is their time to shine as well.
Yep. Yep. And another thing I've noticed with screen printing, Zach, is when I was in middle school, my high school had a screen printing press, a manual press, and they would do that in the art department. By the time I got into high school, that was gone. Vocational schools there were a lot that taught screen printing. It feels like that's not as common. You've got to do it at college, essentially, to learn it. Do you think that's part of the reason too?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of just adapting to modern technology, right? Same with typing on a typewriter. or people talk about cursive handwriting, right? As time progresses and as technology becomes more accessible to people, especially younger ages, they adapt things that are more advanced than we would have at the same age. And it's an interesting comparison you make. I, strangely enough, still have the T-shirt that I screen printed when I was in high school. When I learned how to print, I still have it. Tiny little T-shirt, worn out. But I still have it, and I still remember what that was like. And for me, it's not necessarily the connection to screen printing specifically. It's the connection to understanding the creative process and saying, I can take something from here and I can put it on a T-shirt. And, if people are averse to saying, well, I'm traditional, I believe that you should be screen printing. It's not about the method, it's about the ability, right? And if the access we have now is that kids are diving in headfirst and they're going straight to digital printing, awesome. If people are getting there, they're in their business, they're starting a business and they're, 40 years old and their first endeavor is in printing is DTF, great. Get into it, figure out a way to get into it, figure out a way to access it. I don't necessarily think that it's a one-to-one, you teach it and people learn it. I think it's understanding the connection, and you and I have spoke, this comes from my teaching background. And I'm passionate about it. It's understanding a way to connect, the creative process to the real world. And I think if that's handprint, if for me, if that's digital, if for somebody else that's hybrid, whatever tools we need to give them, I think it's an awesome thing to be able to give them. And everybody learns differently, everybody reacts differently, everybody adopts technology differently. And this is a great point that I don't know if we really had planned to talk about it in here, but I think having all of these ways that people can access this world and access this community and this industry, I think is just another advantage to having all of those tools in your toolbox.
Well, I mean, there's many things I love about our industry, but it does feel like a cohesive community. I was at an event and Peter Walsh, and if you've never met Peter Walsh at M&R, he's a fun Australian. But he once, pulled me to the side and told me something. And he just mentioned rock and how competition like rock helped M&R become even better at what they do. Because anybody out there, M&R is the benchmark equipment for all this stuff. I'm not just saying it, but I mean the most loyal customers I've ever seen for equipment. And once you go blue, you're blue. And it's funny, I ended one of my videos I recorded at the Printing United event, Go Blue, and then it totally hit me, Zach. Zach and I are both Buckeyes, and you don't say Go Blue. But back to, screen printing. I keep going back to this because, again, it is the foundation of printing. Plastisol. Yeah. Plastisol screen printing has always been the bread and butter. It seemed like around 10 years, and maybe it was just my timing of being in the industry, but it seemed like Discharge and Waterbase was getting real popular, and now I don't see it that often. I mean, any thoughts there, Zach?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I've got a pretty heavy history there. So at the time, I was employed by Adidas and running some research and development out of one of their facilities, and so there was a big push for Waterbase. It went from Plastisol to phthalate free to, all of the discharges had to be, run through. All the MSDS were scrutinized. Every little bit of what was in your ink is really important, especially when you're printing globally. And I think at that time, Adidas was trying to be an industry leader and saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to self-impose, and we're going to go water-based. And so, we're going to go PVC-free, phthalate-free, and then eventually water-based. And so at the time, I had been working in the facility with the R&D team, with my entire team, and we spent a lot of time testing acrysols, testing, phthalate-free, PVC-free Plastisols, testing all the water-based inks. And, it was a culture change at the time, kind of a culture shock to a lot of the people who had been printing Plastisol forever. But in the end, everybody sort of relearned the process and then had an entire new way of printing to kind of put, under their belt, an extra little ability in their in their repertoire. And I think it's interesting that it, just like the technologies, the types of inks and types of printing comes and goes. You know, you have that ebb and flow. I think that you're seeing it still globally. From my perspective, I'm seeing it still globally, especially in Europe. You're seeing a lot of wire-based printing. Out of Asia, you're seeing a lot of water-based printing. In the U.S., these companies, these big brands, had mandated it for a while, and had asked for it for a while, and then saw that the consumer wasn't necessarily willing to pay for it, so they were absorbing the cost. And then some of that has started to die back down, especially through the cost and through some of the raw material shortages in the COVID period you talked about. So there are a lot of external and internal factors. I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think there's a lot of external and internal factors that have said, hey, Waterbase, nope, go away. Now it's probably going to come back, go away. We see that with specialty inks. We see that with everything. I don't think it's gone. I don't think it's really going to subside. I think you're going to have a lot of brands who really believe in it and do it for the right reasons. You've got some who do it for fashion reasons and feel and hand feel. But I think it's balanced out in the U.S. that if you are a printer that is able to print water-based and is competent printing water-based, it is an avenue for you to get some business and some high-end business that other people can't get. And then, of course, it opens the door to hybrid printing as well.
And you kind of were, working your way into my next segment, which, again, one of so many things I love about our industry, but the biggest one for me is how many different ways you can make money. I mean, there's so many different business models using the exact same equipment. Mm-hmm. Or, again, you're going to buy a certain type of equipment in that sector to, meet your target market's needs. So, you can go retail, you can go contract, you can go print on demand, and which really will, that'll be the digital conversation. So again, when do you often see someone buy equipment that is wanting to get into contract, work? Because, a big screen print automatic press, it's not exactly cheap. A good way to start, keeping that press constantly busy is to get into contract. So it seems like the majority of people that I talk to that have an auto also offer contract decorating. That's not every shop, but I mean, it's a strategy.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because we've got all the customers, every single silo. You've got the people who only print for themselves. You've got people who are only contract. You've got people who are doing just direct to consumer. You've got people who are only doing wholesale, and people who are doing their own printing in large scale. So you've got that really big to really small. And it is an interesting question, because I think that everybody has different reasons for buying and investing in equipment. And everybody has different opportunities. I think a good way to answer the question is, I've seen a lot of customers come to us, for example, for the Polaris. They've come to us and said, I've got this really big printing operation, 20 screen print machines. I've got all of this, but I turn away a ton of business because it's a lot of one-offs. And it would never fit what we did, and we have to send it to contract. We send it to a friend of ours. We send it to a guy down the road. But we've done the numbers and realized that there is so much business we're turning away because we're just not set up for direct-to-consumer business. And it's a different way of thinking, a different market, a different mindset, and you have to have a different, ERP system and way of shipping, and, SLAs are different and expectations of quality are different. But if you want to take that step over the threshold, open that door and take that step into the direct-to-garment world or into the direct-to-consumer world, it opens, huge opportunities for businesses. And so I think maybe that's an answer to your question. We see people come for big equipment for all kinds of reasons. A lot of times it's just capacity, right? Maybe it's aged equipment. Maybe they're switching manufacturers from something that they've had for a long time and it's fallen apart and they want something else. Or maybe they've got a lot of our equipment and they need 2 more in order to fit the projections for next year. But we do have a lot of people come and say, hey, I know that the biggest growth sector right now is direct-to-consumer business or e-com business, or fulfillment, online fulfillment for a business I already have. How do I do that? And they're buying into just another sector. They're expanding their business. They're not necessarily taking what they're doing and trying to do it differently. They're trying to be additive.
Diversify. I mean, again, it's the first rule of investment. And, again, with COVID, you definitely want to have a lot of multiple revenue models going on if you can without distracting yourself. Screen printing equipment, Zach, when we're buying equipment of any kind, one thing is back in our head is, when's this going to become obsolete? When is this, it will start depreciating right when I roll it in, typically, unless you bought it before the pandemic, and then a couple of years after, maybe it's worth more than what you paid. Sure. But screen printing equipment, I mean, it's built. You got to also look at outside of the press. You've got the dryer. Those are your two big things. Mm-hmm. They're built to last decades, right? Yeah, they've got more technology on them, but it's not something that just dies, overnight. Or, I mean, yeah, it might take some tinkering over time, just like a car, but it lasts decades. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. And I've used a lot of equipment from a lot of companies when I was on the other side of the screen here and on the, on the impression side and on the fulfillment side. And I think it's interesting to see how people look at different brands and different pieces of equipment. But, the thing we hear, and I can only talk from personal experience, the thing we hear a lot here is the equipment sometimes almost lasts too long. We get that criticism sometimes. It's, hey, I want to buy a new press, but I can't justify it because it's, it's still running really well. And, we had some early machines in one of the shops that I was in. And you're right. The reputation is there, and the reputation is true. They're engineered, and the engineering here that happens in-house and all the building that happens here in-house in this facility, everything is made here. And the criticism is it's over-engineered, it's overbuilt, but the reason is because the reliability of the M&R name is on the equipment. When something is blue, you expect it to last, and you expect it to be predictable. You expect it to, not have issues, and you expect it to be supported, and that's the best way we can support it. And so I think it's interesting to look at equipment and say, how am I going to invest in this, and how long until it becomes obsolete? Because in the digital world, right, how many times have you changed this in your lifetime?
But right? How loyal are you? Again, I'm an Apple guy. Nothing is going to convince me otherwise. M&R, again, I'm not just saying it to say it, the most loyal customers, and they all have the banner proudly put in their shop.
Yeah, and I love that, and I'm thankful for that, but I do have to say it's not because of the brand. Apple does a really good job of marketing. Apple does a really good job of being shiny and new and neat and that sort of thing. M&R's loyalty is really built on the reputation of what the equipment does and how it lasts and how well it's built. And I think that, we're doing digital products. We build digital printers. We build DTF machines. We do all of that. But all of our success is built on the back of the engineering prowess and the manufacturing prowess of the round machines, the oval machines, the dryers, because we've been doing that forever. It's tried and true, and we know how to do it, and we know how to do it well. And so I think you're right. It lasts a long time, but it's also allowed us to leverage that to be able to get into these other sectors of the business and be creative and explore and say, we come from printing, so we understand printing. Now let's get into the other pieces of printing. So it's all sort of a package, and it's all sort of an experience, I think.
So going back to digital squeegee, again, it's essentially an automatic press, but at the very end of it, essentially we have a digital print head mounted over top of it. So same kind of concept there. That machine will last potentially decades. You're just probably going to have to replace some digital print heads over time. Same concept there?
Yeah. I mean, the same sort of engineering goes into that. The team here, the product team, the product development team, the engineering team, the applications team, they all know how printing works. They all know how things need to interact with other things. They're not just taking one and putting it on another. They understand the entire process in order to leverage and build the capability to then put digital on top of it. And so, there's always consumables in systems like that. The more moving parts you have, the more things that, may be consumables over time. But, we've got DSs that have been in the field for years and years and years, running the original heads. It really, when you get into digital equipment, I'll make a blanket statement for everybody's equipment. When you get into digital equipment, it's all about how well you take care of it. That's what it is. It's all about how well you maintain it, and you do your upkeep, and you keep your environment clean. And
environment. Respect this humidity. It took me a long time in my 20s. I'm like, why is humidity a big factor with my DTG machine? Well, after you replace some $1,200 print heads, you start to learn. Which segues into the third process, really. So screen, it is the foundation of all apparel printing. Mm-hmm. Digital squeegee is essentially screen with kind of a DTG print head above the glass palette. But DTG, I like to look at DTG as there's really three types of equipment, Zach. You have your single platen units, okay? Yep. And your Epson, your Brothers, you're talking around 20K. Mm-hmm. Then you start getting into your dual or tri-press or printers. Now those, start at 60 to 200 plus, way more than that. Then above that, you have the inline. Now, DTF, which is going to be the fourth part of this, has definitely eaten into DTG. And where I have seen it eat into DTG more than anything are the smaller single setups. Because I've been in some big shops where they're doing thousands of DTG prints every day, and DTF has not affected their demand because it's still, from a POD standpoint, from a speed and everything, it's hard to deny what it can do, Zach.
Yeah, exactly right. That's how, that's my experience as well. And I think, it makes a lot of sense. The people who are in the small DTG world are a little bit more flexible, right? They've got one machine, they can move it, they can replace it, they can bring in new technology. They're also working with technology that is a little bit less expensive and that is sometimes treated like a consumable. After time, you don't replace parts, you don't fix things, you get rid of it, you get a new one, right? Yeah. So it's easier to be flexible in that space, but they don't have the demand and they don't have the speed constraints and they don't have the SLAs necessarily that these big industrial DTGs have. And so the big industrial DTG market, the fact that you can pull all of the labor out of it, you can pre-treat inline, you can do your white, you can do your color, it comes off, you put it in a conveyor dryer, you get rid of all of that handling, all that personal labor. You can't compete with that with DTF, with small DTG, with any of that. So it really is, you're right, you kind of take DTG and you split it in half. Small DTG, which there's a little bit of mid-size that fits in there, and industrial DTG, same thing. Right.
Big industrial
DTG. And so the erosion that's happening in the DTG market and in the technology of small DTG is happening from DTF because it's essentially the same thing. You trade a little bit of labor and you trade a little bit of hand feel, maybe quality, those sort of things for the ability to print on other substrates like polyester. Yep. Right. And so you have people who are saying, I've got some DTF right here somewhere. You've got some people saying, okay, I don't know the difference, right? The feel, the look, all of that. I'll trade that in order to be able to print on anything I want, anytime I want. Yep. And you've got a certain customer who would say, hey, I need the digital version because I need that quality. I need that hand feel. Like that's important to me. And so a lot of it is dictated by your customer or how well you know your customer, what they're willing to accept. And there's a spectrum there. But you are completely right. If there's a place that DTF is eating in more than another, it's what I would call entry level across the board. There's not entry level hybrid. That doesn't really exist. But there's entry level DTG and there's entry level screen print. And those are the places where DTF has sort of pulled a little bit of that, a little bit of that field.
Yeah, DTG has a great hand, but the two things that everyone hates about DTG, one is pre-treat. It just is the worst part of the whole process. Printing is beautiful. And the second being just you really are limited as far as what you can go on compared to something like DTF. It's a water-based ink. It's not really meant to go on moisture-wicking material that doesn't also want high heat. So, but DTG, it's definitely not dying. It's pivoted. when I walk around the trade show, I won't do it at Long Beach, and I don't do it at Printing United because it's too big. But like Fort Worth Impressions is coming up. I'll walk around the room and I'll keep track of what equipment I see, just to give us an idea of, okay, maybe this is where the trends are going. And I bet 80% of booths that have equipment will have DTF. Yep. It'll be under 10% have screen printing equipment. Not to say that, hey, this really tells us a whole lot, but DTG, it's, a few years ago, you saw it everywhere. It's a lot smaller, and it's more of the inline machines that, again, I hear being purchased more often. But again, they're not dead. You have to know what your market is. I know somebody who just bought one, a small brother machine, because they're not going to pre-treat because they're not printing with white, and it is the best process for their customer and the products they're printing. And I think that's the big thing to take away, Zach, is what are we printing on? What's our customer asking for, and what's our budget? I mean, obviously, we want the best and greatest, but not everybody can afford a digital squeegee or has the space for it. You got to figure that out as well.
I think it's a trend in our conversation, right? You say, hey, you only have screen print, you're going to think everything's screen print. I think as we evolve, you'll see that everything starts to find its place. And I think that's where we're at now. Now, if you're a shop that only has one or two of these four technologies, you're going to see it very differently. But these people who are starting to get it into all of them are starting to see, okay, maybe screen isn't the answer for everything. I got a little bit of hybrid, and I find out, well, I'm not that good at setting up a screen print press, so maybe hybrid's even bigger for me. We've got customers printing 5,000 piece jobs on hybrid because they're really efficient at it. They're really good at it. So some shops are different. And I think that's important to think about when we get into this DTG conversation, because, the person who could easily jump into DTG and say, well, there are some things that are really complicated, pre-treat, right? Jetting white through a print head can be complicated, but it was a necessary evil of the time, right? If I wanted to do anything direct to consumer before DTF was big, I had to be in the DTG world. Well, there's some people who want to be in DTG, some people who need to be in DTG, and some people who, are just there because it's the next big thing. Well, those people who just kind of felt like being there and who were there out of necessity are moving into DTF because that has become a little easier and a little more accessible. But you're always going to have that sector of people that say, my business is 100% direct to consumer. I've got all this made-to-order business that comes from e-com straight into my machine, straight out the door, and 80% of it's cotton. Well, they're not going to slow down. They're not going to stop running a Polaris. They're not going to scale down their operation just because DTF is the next hot thing. It fits their business so well, and it fits the industrial version of their business so well that I don't think that that's shifting at all. And that's why you see a shift in the lower end DTG rather than the industrial DTG, I think.
Yep. And again, your customer doesn't care if you do the actual decorating. Have confidence to be able to outsource when something's outside of your comfort zone or outside of your equipment. Sometimes I think people buy equipment just for that one job that's coming in, but then they don't know how to keep it busy after that.
Sure, and I know that you have this conversation with your customers, and I know you've consulted in the past. It's a good conversation to have, and I think the flip side is, if you're buying equipment for a very small part of your job, it's for a very small part of your workload. I think it's how do you make it a big part of your business? Do you need to push it out, or do you need to pull more in? And I think that's where we see a lot of people struggle, because they only see their business with tunnel vision and what they do right now. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for people to say, well, maybe I don't do MTO right now, and I'd love to be able to do fill-ins for my bookstore work, or, I'd love to be able to do 10 pieces for the local, fire department, but I don't have the equipment for it. Well, it's not about that one 10-piece job. It's about how many things am I turning away for the year, or how do I change my website or my business, or where, the avenues I'm getting business from in order to fill up this sector that's all 10-piece and below.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Zach. And one thing that I've seen over the past 10 or so years are stores, online stores. It's pretty much almost expected if you have a t-shirt printing business that you could provide a site to them, which opened up the print on demand. And I think you're making a great point, Zach, because I bet 15, 20 years ago, most of these screen printers weren't thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start handing out sites to everybody. Right. And when that started becoming real popular, if you remember Teespring, and Teespring really made campaigns popular. And what it was, hey, you had to reach this goal for a campaign to then really hit the minimum so that we can screen print it. And so what I've seen a shift in, Zach, when it comes to stores are very popular, but less and less are actually doing batch production. They're doing less, okay, I'm going to gather orders over a period of time, and then I'm going to screen print all the jobs. Because always at some point, a parent will contact you, and they'll say, oh, I forgot to order, or one little mistake was made, and it's just a hassle. And then we're doing a digital print of a one-off, and it just, yeah. So I think, yeah, to your point, Zach, build it out. Because I know a lot of shops, DecoNetwork has had stores for a long time. They'll be on DecoNetwork for years, and then all of a sudden they're like, why am I not taking, I'm already paying for it. And then they're getting into digital printing after they completely hated it because it just didn't fit their previous model. So, adapting to times for sure, too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you've got people who can make the business case and start to build the business and need the demand, and then they get the equipment for it. And then you've got the flip side, right? Get the equipment, find a way to build the demand because now I have the capability. And we see customers in both sectors. I can think of one who is a really interesting customer who said, okay, I'm going to buy a Polaris because I've got all these graphics that I'm doing for resort wear where it's pretty much the same, but I changed the city name, or I changed the image that's in the fill. And so they're doing larger runs on the same sort of T-shirts. They're doing hundreds at a time, but they're doing them on digital because they have the ability to do them quicker that way and not do all the setups and have one piece of equipment. But what they said was, well, now that I have this, I can start to pull that other one-off business in. I can start to pull the stuff that I'm saying no to back in-house because I'm contracting and I'm still doing it, but I'm subcontracting it for the same customer that I'm doing the 100-piece run for. And so, it's chicken and the egg, right? Do you build the business and show the demand and then get the equipment, or do you get the equipment and see how many doors it opens for you to be able to add, other avenues of business and other work streams, other opportunities, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Well, and speaking of opportunities, let's talk about the fourth decoration process. Yeah. And I love to show people the Quattro. And do you know why it's called the Quattro? Most people don't, and I always thought it was really cool. It's the Quattro because it's the fourth printing method of apparel. So DTF, Zach, I always argue, see if you agree, it's the biggest disruptor of any decoration process we've seen. And one of the reasons why it has been, so quickly adopted is because of DTG. DTG helped propel DTF. We went through a lot of learning as an industry and pain. Again, I bring up humidity. When I got my DTF, I understood to respect this. When it says it needs to be 50% humidity, we're not kidding. 50 is the number. Yeah. So, I just think that the DTG helped DTF in that way. But like we were saying earlier, you can go on a wider range of products. And a lot of people, you can get started without having to have the equipment, which is really unlike any of these other processes. So you can build up your demand, and then you're starting to spend, $50,000 a year on transfers. It's like, well, let's bring this in-house, have more control, speed, and so forth. So, and now automation seems the big thing. When I was at M&R's booth, you had, after it came off the dryer shaker, you had an inline rotary cutter, and then even you had the flatbed cutter with a robotic arm to grab the transfer off. So it's becoming more and more automated. It's so early still, though, Zach. I mean, what are we, 5 years into it?
Yeah, it is early. DTF's been around for a while, but never really adopted the way it is. And I think there's a reason for that. Before we get into that, you talked about the Quattro. I'd be remiss if I didn't do a callback because you talked about Mr. Walsh before, and that's where that came from. Really being ahead of the curve and talking about, there are really what we're talking about today. There are 4 decoration types that really make up our industry that allow you to have these pillars to build your business on, and so that is where that came from, and that was a Peter Walsh-ism, the Quattro. So, and I think it's perfect, and the reason I say that DTF was kind of a perfect storm is you've got industry conditions, you've got a technology bubble of everybody understanding DTG, like you said, and being used to working with digital and understanding how it fits the business. You've got the pandemic that really forced people to buy a lot of stuff online, but also have an expectation of I'm going to have it in my hand tomorrow. Yeah. And then the last piece is really you had a economy that in the equipment side. CapEx purchases weren't really being made. Everybody was waiting to see. We bought a lot of things in the COVID era. A lot of people bought a lot of equipment, a lot of blanks. There was this little bit of a bubble, and so people weren't investing super heavy. And so this is that perfect storm, in my opinion, of a piece of equipment that is attainable in cost, a piece of equipment that is attainable as far as complexity goes. You understand it. The technology is not that hard. Something that fits the bill of the on-demand market and needing to do it fast and needing to do it on anything, and then something I can get into without taking a lot of risk. I'm not completely changing my business or buying a building or converting what I do. I can buy one machine and kind of see how it goes. And so I think all of those factors allowed people to say, hey, DTF makes sense for me right now. And everybody did it all at the same time. DTF was in the U.S., 8 years ago. Yeah. But it really wasn't acceptable. It wasn't good enough. DTG still was kind of being adopted as, a made-to-order thing, and then DTF was like everybody saw it as really thick, athletic, didn't really want to touch it. And then this storm I was talking about happened where everybody's expectations kind of pulled down a little bit for quality. Their expectations for speed, came up. Their expectations for cost went down. And so all of this kind of like boxed in around DTF. And so DTF, among the other things I said, it's scalable, it's flexible. You can buy one and then your business goes and you buy another and you buy another and you fill a whole room for them. And we've got DTF Farms in the U.S. and all around the globe that people are, putting 10, 20, 30 of these in rooms to be able to scale. So they don't have to buy bigger equipment, they just buy more. It's garment, it's color, it's material, almost material agnostic, right? You want a polyester shirt and I want a baseball jersey and he wants a cotton tee. I can do it all just back to back to back, right? So that makes it easy. The flexibility of being able to take an order for one piece or 100 pieces and be able to put them on there, and so it just had everything everybody was looking for. So I don't think necessarily if DTF came to the front 5 years ago or 10 years ago when small DTG did, I don't think it would have taken off the way it did. It was just kind of the market conditions, the social conditions, the economic conditions, all and labor as well, all kind of converged at the same time. And I looked at that machine, as a customer, and I say, I can do all of that myself. I can put that, in the space that I have in my building. Yeah, like I can buy one today and buy two next week if I need to. All of those things, just the math kind of worked out for everybody, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, when I knew DTF was going to take off, because all of my screen printing really done in my shop, Zach, has always been plastisol heat transfers. I've always been a transfer guy.
Yeah.
And because that's what I would do. I would sell heat presses and transfers to high schools, and I teach them how to print their own shirts, because we're not screen printing in schools. I'll teach you how to heat press in the school. And guess what? They love DTF. I mean, plastisol transfers, I can still beat the cost greatly with a one color print, but the thing is, once you've been shown, oh wait, I can look through clear film, they don't want it. I thought, okay, hey, they still want to save money. They're going to go. Not a lot of my clients. They'd rather be able to see through it, the clearness. Unless I need a special effect for it, they don't care. But back to my point was how I knew DTF was going to be popular was the screen printers I talked to that are, diehard screen printers were like, oh, this is going to make my life a lot easier here. I'm in. Because I didn't see DTG get adopted like that for a lot of screen print shops. They just were like, no, I don't like it. DTF, totally different. And it was probably your perfect storm situation as well. But it just seemed very different than DTG, which, again, I think DTG took the lumps for DTF as well.
That's a good way to put it.
I know,
I think you're right. It laid the groundwork for sure, and all the people who were naysayers kind of got it out of their system with DTG. There were some of us that still, weren't convinced DTF was going to be as big as it was, and I think the thing that changed those minds, and I would probably be on that side of things as open and optimistic as I am about technology. I think DTF, I still wasn't convinced because I had seen it 6 years ago, 8 years ago, and the changes that have been made in the past 2 years, 1.5 years, and some of the things you were talking about just a minute ago are really the difference in some of these high-end operations adopting DTF. We've got to a point where inks are way better, colors are way better, white, cheaper. White is way more opaque and way more optic white. Your grinds of your adhesives are to the point where the hand feels so much better. We've learned how to create and how to teach people how to create artwork, that's broken up enough, to not have that thick hand feel. You've got breaks in the artwork and you build it correctly in order to make it high quality. And then past that is the reference you had made. Now we're into how do we add efficiencies to the process? How do we create an entire ecosystem, not a machine? So you've got a DTF machine. We're doing the enhancements. We're trying to make it as good as we can. We've got a lot of things on that list, but how do we make the cutter? How do we make the handling? How do we incorporate heat pressing and movement? How do we take automation and add efficiency for the customer rather than bells and whistles? It's how do we get some of that labor out of it, and how do we bring some of the costs down for the consumer?
Yeah, and one thing I think we might start seeing with DTF is more shops who buy equipment are buying their own spectrophotometers, because the thing about DTF, for those out there, you have a lot of variables. You have powder, ink, film, okay? But it's hard to fathom this, and I don't have a lot of experience with the Quattro, Zach, but most of those printers, you could put that same printer in Florida and then put one in Arizona, and those are going to print totally different. Even if you get the room to have the same humidity, even elevation, there's just variables with digital printing. And again, like, the film can change. That's something I've seen with DTF. It was the quality of the consumables has gone way up. Because initially you were getting film that was poorly coated sometimes, or just instant hot peel. I mean, 2 years ago, anybody who said, hey, it's instant hot peel. No, it's not. Have you ever printed a plastisol transfer that is an instant hot peel? But now they truly instantly hot peel. I've not had anywhere. The quality of everything has gone up. The cost has gone down. When you compare it to the cost of DTG ink, when I first got into DTG 14 years ago, it's a joke. I mean, it really is crazy cheap consumables. But again, to get all these variables to play correctly, with this technology behind it, color profiling, I think, is a big part of DTF that we're all starting to kind of get into more, because, Zach, I make a lot of videos, and some of these booths I go to, they'll have a CMYK DTF printer, and then they'll have another one with expanded colors. Now, for those who don't know, M&R has a couple different types of DTG printers. One of them is the Maverick, and I was always extremely impressed with the Maverick because it had, light cyan, light magenta, or is it a fluorescent? And it just opens up the color gamut. But you'll see, what you're seeing with DTF nowadays is everybody's like, look, I've got more heads, I've got more colors. That only works if you've color profiled it correctly. You know,
Correct.
you have to have the RIP software has to know what colors, how it's a formula is the way I always look. If you want to make that color digitally, how much do we need of each thing? And I hate it when I go to these booths and they'll like literally trash their CMYK, talk up this other printer. And I'm like, why are you struggling? I'm using the same consumables you're using. You just have the wrong color profile. And I hear it from dealers all the time. And it's so I think there's still a learning curve though, as a group,
Certainly.
because that's like my next purchase. One thing, I mean, I know my color's in the ballpark. It's not perfect. And I do think that our customers are starting, you know, if I'm trying to replace some of my screen print with digital, I got to be able to nail that color. And that my market, because I'm taking my plastisol transfer market to there, I need that color accuracy. And CMYK can get you really close. It's not going to hit every color, but it gets you really close if you have the right tools. And a spectrophotometer, I think you're going to see that's going to become a big tool that a lot of shops start investing.
Yeah, it's a great subject, and I think a lot of great points you hit on. I'll try and respond to a couple of them. One of them is just color in general. I think two things. One, you're going to start to see a lot more talk in the expanded gamut world because people say, you know, well, what's next? How do I improve this machine? How do I make the next machine? There is some talk already. You see a few machines out there, but you're right. If you don't handle color correctly through your RIP software, and if you don't process it correctly and you don't have controlled consumables, it doesn't matter. And when you look at CMYK versus CMYK red-green, like you were talking about, or CMYK red-green, orange-violet, you know, you can get small expansions in your color space, but only if you handle it correctly and only if you have that consistency. And so one of the things that we did early on with Quattro is we said we're not going to cut corners on ink. We're going to have it made for us. We're going to have it specifically made for us with our shades, and we're going to profile it very specifically and work with Caldera on this and put one RIP in this and say this is the way that we're going to handle it. We've spent a lot of time, the applications team and Cody Carsano have spent a lot of time here working with RIP software and color profiling, and every time, you know, he uses the i1 Pro or uses the Barbieri, our Spectros, he's able to create a little bigger space for us. You know, there's a lot of opportunity, I guess is what I'm saying, for shops and for people and for manufacturers to be able to just use the CMYK or the expanded gamut to give you more and more and more. And so I think a lot of the advancements you're going to see when it comes to DTF is intentionally handling color, people partnering with RIP companies, people making sure that their consumables are consistent. We know that our film works really well with our ink, works really well with our powder, and we know what you're going to get when you use our profile set, and we give you options of profiles. And so if you went out there and said, well, I'm just going to pick that film, I'm going to pick that ink, and I'm just going to, you know, use a base profile that's in here, you're right. If you install one in this side of the country and this side of the country, they could be wildly different. We have spent a lot of time trying to narrow that in and say you can expect a certain outcome. You know what you're going to get from these consumables. If you put something else in, if you treat it differently, if you have your environment set wrong, yes, you're going to have aberrations from that. But we're trying to make it predictable for the customer so that is not one of the worries of DTF printing. You know, they can go in there and turn it on and know what they're going to get every single time and replicate it. And so I think we're pretty proud of the work that we've done there. But I'll say, you know, in the next breath, we're not anywhere close to done. You know, we're never done with that piece. We're always pursuing a bigger color gamut. We're always pursuing a machine that's a little more intelligent. We're always pursuing consumables that are a little more consistent, because those are the things that customers didn't have. And probably part of the reason that this technology wasn't adopted years ago. You know, you were ordering film and the next roll that you would get would be completely different, and it would be super discouraging. You know, and so we're trying to head off some of those things, and I think we're doing a good job at it, but like I said, we're never going to stop. I think continuing to advance the technology side and continuing to advance the consumables and software predictability side are equally important.
Yeah, I mean, it is really exciting. I do, you know, you can have confidence, though, nowadays. I mean, again, 4 years ago, I was like, I'll let everybody else be the guinea pig. I'll just outsource it because it did take some headaches and some learning curves. I mean, with some of the dryers and just printers and just are we going to go powderless? There's been a lot that's learned. But if like you said, Zach, the space, M&R makes it as turnkey as possible. I mean, if you want to be successfully offering a decoration process overnight, it's got to be the easiest one.
Yeah, and I use that word ecosystem because that's really what we're trying to make. We're not trying to give you one piece of the puzzle and saying you're on your own. If something goes wrong, we'll point at the other things that you're using. Maybe it's that. We're really trying to create that, and we're trying to create it with the machine, with the consumables, and we're trying to create it with the entire process. And so you'll see us continue to invest in automation and efficiencies and software and things that allow you to kind of have the entire package and have a reliable package that communicates with itself. And so that's some of the fun, exciting things that I get to work on here is, what's next. We've got people working on what's right now and making it better and continuing on that path, but we're also working on what's next and then what's after that. And those are really exciting.
Yeah. So back to one of my earlier questions. So how long can we expect a piece of equipment to last? So again, a DTG printer. I mean, I still have my brother printer from 14 years ago. I have replaced some print heads because I didn't respect humidity. I don't use it to print white ink because I'm going to DTF it. Really, I'm probably hoarding it at this point just because my market isn't asking for it. But, I just won't let it go. But DTF, if let's say somebody bought a Quattro today, one of the things, again, with digital equipment is we often think, okay, what's the lifespan? Is this going to start? Does it have 4 or 5 years? I mean, I have confidence in being able to get 10 years out of a machine. Absolutely. Again, you may have to replace a head. You're going to definitely, do some cap wiper cleaners and some filters and so forth. But I mean, is that fair, Zach? Do you think that, you get 10 years at least out of a Quattro?
Yeah, if you're taking care of your equipment, it'll last for sure. I think you will come to a point, just like you were talking about with your DTG equipment, where you as a customer will have to make a decision between, do I extend the life of this machine I'm working with, or do I adopt the next version of the technology? Because we are still really early in DTF and relatively early in DTG. I know that sounds strange for people to hear, but there's still so many more things that can be done in DTG, and there's a lot of things that could be done at DTF. And so you'll see these advancements, and whether it's like we talked about, a software change or a color gamut change or the size of a machine or automation or whatever it is, you will be faced with more questions about, do I want to add things to this machine, or do I want to buy a different machine before do I need to replace it? And so I think it's really going to be that question is, what is my business doing and what are my business needs? Do I need the automation piece? Do I need something that's faster? Do I need something that has more heads rather than, hey, this thing is starting to deteriorate and I need to replace it? We certainly lived in that world. DTF machines and early DTG machines were those machines, right? You have an extra sitting in the corner just for parts, and you cannibalize it, and you fix the machine you have, or you replace it. And we're past that era. We're into the, you're making an investment in a machine that's built and built well, and it wouldn't, the Quattro wouldn't be painted blue if it didn't have that backing behind it, and the service and support network that we have, especially in the U.S. The service team is pretty amazing here, especially with how quickly they got behind this new technology and learned it. So. I think that you don't have worries in the expiration of the equipment. You really have to keep your finger on the pulse of the industry and say, how quick is it moving, and do I want to be in the front? Do I want to be an early adopter, or do I want to sit back and be one of those people who waits and sees? And right now, there's not a lot of place for the people who are just sitting on their hands and waiting and seeing, right? Everything's moving around them. So I think those people are all buying machines and getting into the DTF workflow, and then they'll be faced with more and more decisions as it goes. Is do I want to be on the front line or not?
I wonder, to turn the tables. I wonder personally if M&R has started. We're really good at making carousel screen presses. These carousel heat presses getting kind of popular because again, DTF has created a demand for it. pre-DTF, you didn't see a dual heat press at a show.
Mm-hmm.
It was rare. Now you see them all the time. Now we're seeing a lot of carousels. And it just, interesting how like even that, demand has completely shifted. And one of my favorite things about DTF that kind of goes with that heat press comment is you've completely moved your bottleneck. Direct to garment. You physically, that garment, you only print so many at a time. It has to be on physically that machine. We've moved our bottleneck to then use the easiest labor possible to print. I mean, if you can't heat press, there's probably nothing. I'm not going to trust you to degrease screens. It is the easiest process, but every process is a time and place, Zach. It's going to come down to, again, what is your business model? What's your target market asking for? What space? What financially can you afford? And but there's a spot for everybody. And DTF definitely on the rise. It's the newest, latest, greatest equipment. But hey, you were at the show. I saw M&R. Every department was hopping. It's not like everyone was not hanging out at screen printing. They were only hanging out near the digital printing. No, every process is a time and place. To think that some of it is dying is a misconception, but everything's pivoting. I mean, HTV is not dead. You're just using it differently. It's going to be the things you can't do digitally, because there's things we cannot do digitally, Zach, that you can only do a different way. So
that's a great point. Let's put some emphasis on that real quick. We did a lot of demonstrations of specialty inks at the show, and it was big. It was a hit. People are asking for it. People are asking for not only demos but instruction and teaching. And Mike Beckman and the team here did some demos with a handful of different specialty types, and it's almost like it's brand new to some people. You can't do it digital. They're seeing it for the first time. They're feeling it. They're excited about it. So you're right. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that you can't do. And so I think the response to the last thing you said about, are we getting into this and that? And I think there's a couple statements. One is we're always going to look at everything. If a customer's asking for it and a customer thinks they need it, whether I think they need it or not, if they're asking for it, we're going to look into it, right? We may do an engineering study and say, hey, that's not going to add any efficiency for you. But if a customer's asking for it because the way they run their business, we're going to look into it and see if it makes sense. So we are always exploring all of it. Anything that you see in the industry or you think might be there, we're looking at it and we're trying it, we're testing it, we're building it, we're understanding if we're going to make a product out of it. But I think knowing that we're always going to be in all of these sectors, we're always going to have these 4 pillars, and if there becomes a 5th, a 6th, we'll adopt it, because this, printing, the company was built on the back of knowing how to print, and knowing how to service equipment and knowing how to build equipment. And so everything is just a layer on top of that. And there's no reason for us to abandon any of it, because it all informs the next thing. And so being able to know how to screen print makes me better at understanding how to hybrid print, which makes me better at understanding how to digitally print, which makes me better at DTF. And so, if there's a customer that's still going to just screen print forever, that's all they ever want to do, there's a place for that. And we're always going to support that, and we're always going to continue to try and innovate in that space, because we know it's an equally important piece. It's not the new shiny thing. There are companies that abandon, they're going to abandon DTF and they're only going to sell, or DTG, and they're only going to sell DTF printers. When the next new shiny thing comes out, they'll stop servicing and selling those, and they'll go to the next thing. And that's just not how we work. We understand that there's a place for all of it, but also the people who've invested there and who've partnered with us along the way, we're not going to leave them behind. We're going to make sure that we're still paying attention to them and their needs, and we're going to add. It's just going to continue to add.
Last question for you, Zach. Here in the States, you're talking about DTF has been around. Europe, Asia, are you seeing new technology typically start there before it gets here? And how far ahead, if you do?
Yeah, I don't know that it would necessarily start there. There is, there's a way of working in parts of the world that things tend to either happen quicker or be adopted quicker or even be copied quicker that happens. And so you see industries like DTF blew up, the manufacturing blew up in Asia because they were able to do that and everybody's making one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're more technologically advanced. Sometimes those ideas start other places, or sometimes that equipment starts other places and then it gets made there. And so I think we're seeing adoption of new technology quicker in Asia than anywhere else, and then the Americas, and then Europe's a little bit slower in some of these only because of regulation. They have stricter standards, stricter regulation for consumables, for equipment, for all of those sort of things. So sometimes there's more hoops to jump through. It's not a want or an ability to adopt. It's just the process is a little bit longer there. But I don't think it's necessarily that the U.S. was behind any of this. Behind in the timeline of any of it. I think it was just the market timeline just dictated for us to, hey, now's the time to start to adopt this technology. And so there are new technologies coming out, and we find them all over the world, and we partner all over the world, and we say, hey, we want to look at this, technology, we want to look at this software, we want to look at this equipment, and then we want to bring it back and we want to make it here, and so we're looking at everything. We're looking inside the industry, outside the industry. That's where the new advancements come from. It's not repurposing a screen print press is not going to revolutionize what we're doing or making the next iteration of the gauntlet. It'll be great. It'll be things that make everybody's lives better, but it's not the next DTF. That comes from somewhere else and repurposing.
Awesome. Well, Zach, where can our audience go to learn more about the 4 different printing processes and the different types of equipment that M&R offers?
Yeah, so, of course, the website, mrprint.com. We've got sales reps and distributors and everybody in every territory, globally, really. So you can look and reach out to any of them. You can come direct to the website. There's forms there. I'm sure you can find a contact for me if you've got questions. Really, everybody who works here and works with M&R and for M&R is excited to do what they do. We're passionate and we love this. And so, when you stop me at the show and just had a quick conversation, like, we want to talk about these things because we believe in them. We're not here to talk a certain agenda. We're not here to, go through the motions. Like the subjects we talked about today, or even what you and I talked about offline at the show, just like what's exciting right now, is exciting. It's truly exciting. So I think reaching out to anybody here, they're passionate about what they do. So you're not going to be short on resources of finding somebody who's happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, and there's always, a local shop too that seems like if they have blue equipment and you're looking at it, hey, they'll invite you right in. Check it out and see for yourself.
I love that. Like, people are really good advocates for this, and it's honest. It's an honest passion and an honest experience. And I think asking people what they think, because, asking the people who've been invested in our equipment for years and years and years what they think is probably the best way to really understand it. And I certainly would invite everybody to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Zach. This is the last time I'm ever going to say it, but go blue. Because, hey, I don't care if you're looking at screen printing, digital squeegee, DTG, DTF, M&R sets the benchmark, loved throughout the industry, great reputation, and always innovating. And I definitely suggest, go into the trade shows whenever you can. M&R is a sponsor of Short Lab Tribe, like we are at DecoNetwork. It's a great group that you can bounce ideas, network with. But you don't know what you don't know, Zach. Education. I mean, there's so much out there, and just like we were talking about the trade show, we saw a machine there that wasn't available a month ago. So just staying up with the times. But thank you so much for joining us, Zach, and look forward to doing this again sometime.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. All of that means a lot. I think, I love what I do. We love what we do. So I think it shows. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. Take care.